Hello and welcome to the Wheel Crime Podcast, the podcast where two ladies play games, mumble profanities, and laugh way too often. Also, this podcast does cover topics of sensitive nature, and as such, listener discretion is advised.
Welcome back to the Wheel of Crime podcast with your hosts, Jen and...
Hey! This is a regular scheduled programming episode, just like usual. It's been a while, because we had Spooktober, and then, we had you do your story, and then we were right into Remembrance Day, and now it's my turn once again.
I know, starting next week. So we'll just give you guys a brief show update before we get into things. Starting next week, we are getting into our seasonal episodes, and in December, we're going to do a listener story episode because we loved doing the one in Spooktober so much. So please head over to our Instagram. In the link in our bio, there's a Google form where you can anonymously submit your stories. So start submitting now because we really want to hear from you guys again. It was so fun to hear from you last time.
Yes, so fun. We're on to happier times, I hope, since our Remembrance Day episode, because that was a little gloomy.
That was definitely a very hard episode.
Yes, which, to be fair, that anything related to wartime is always kind of a hard conversation to have because there is always so many layers to so many different things and so many atrocities that happen and overall really terrible things. And there's no good way to share a story if you're not going to share all the details is the other part of it too. You can sugarcoat it as much as you like, but then that doesn't really give way to kind of the realities of what happened either. So,
exactly.
Yeah. So,
but today we're covering lighter topics. I assume
slightly.
It is Emily's episode, so those are usually nicer.
Yeah, usually a little nicer. Today, I am covering something that is, I would not say one of my more lighthearted ones, but is significantly more lighthearted than the things that Jenny usually shares. So that is a thing to expect. How was your last week?
It was good. I am full blown into my holiday shopping now because I just really want to get it done in this next week or so that December I can chill and focus on the 5 million other things that are going on because work's crazy this time of year. So I'm trying to get all of those things done and all my wrapping done, and maybe I'll decorate my house at some point. Who knows?
Maybe. I've also been kind of getting into the Christmassy spirit now that we're getting further into the month. Time just seems to always go by so fast at this time of year, which is good because November sucks in general.
Agreed.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about what I did last week, but I don't know, man. Just 'tis the season, and I got nothing else. I work, and then I don't work, and then I sleep, and then I work again. I have been trying to learn how to cook a little bit more because I don't live in proximity of most of the places that I like to eat normally anymore. So I made a salmon lasagna the other day, which was very creative of me.
That sounds fancy.
It was very delicious. Shockingly, because usually when I experiment with food, it goes terribly. It was really good. I'll probably end up making it again at some point. It was basically, I just used a regular lasagna recipe with all of the noodles and the cheese layering and stuff. But instead of a regular meat sauce, which is literally ground beef with vegetables and whatever mixed together, what I did is I baked a salmon, and then I mixed the salmon in with cream cheese and then some spicy peppers, some fresh dill, some tomatoes, and that kind of thing to still make it a quote unquote tomato sauce. And it was really good.
That sounds very tasty.
Yeah. I used a family-sized salmon.
Nice.
Yeah.
I have recently rediscovered the tomato feta pasta that was like going viral back in 2020. And man, I forgot how good it was. So freaking tasty.
Oh, it's so good. And I always really liked mixing in either fresh dill, because that's been like my herb, my go-to herb for the last little while. So you take the tomato feta pasta, but then you put in some like garlic and some like fresh dill, and then whatever your spirit wants additionally. And it only gets better. It is just so good every single time.
So tasty, so easy. Like, I don't know. I love it. It's a great go-to for when you have no time to do anything. So that's really fun.
Exactly. You've reminded me that I need to put feta on my grocery list, actually, because I was actually just thinking about that the other day too. So it's gonna be good cooking around here. I hope, because I made a shrimp fettuccine the other day that was terrible. It was so bad. It was so bad. Um, but on a different note, I guess let's get into our wheel of questions and see if you can guess what my story is for you today.
Yes, spin away, Em.
So, what would you do if you found out that your employer was a murderer?
I would secretly gather evidence to get them arrested. I would wear a wire. I'd do it.
Yeah, I can see it. Probably because I would also do the same thing. Maybe not my current employer, since I'm also married to that one.
Mainly because I would just want all the dirt and all the details.
Yeah, right? But yeah, maybe not with my current employer. I think because I have a personal relationship with that person, I would have to treat that whole situation a little differently.
I mean, he's your husband, so...
Yeah, so it's like a little different. But yeah, no, I feel like though, like thinking back to like previous places that I worked, if I just like somehow figured out that my boss was just like out here taking people out, I'd be like, yeah, no, bitch, get in jail already.
I mean, there's a few past bosses that if I found out that they were doing criminal activity, I would be like, you know what? Jail. Straight to jail.
Do not pass
no
go.
qualms
Straight
about
to jail. Yeah, right? That's just how it is. Yeah, that's really all I got there. Let's move on to our next question. Would you ever want to be a vampire?
13-year-old Jen 100% would. 25, almost 26-year-old Jen, probably not, I mean, maybe. It depends. I want to see a pro-con list.
Yeah.
What kind of vampire?
You see, you want to interview somebody who is already a vampire and see how it impacted their life and what changed.
Exactly. Like, what's the pros? What's the cons? Are they just evil? Like, because I feel like there is different types of vampires out there, so I need to know what I'm getting myself into before I just say yes.
That is quite reasonable. I would say the 13-year-old Emily wasn't really super into becoming a vampire. I could be more convinced today, I think. I would need to see a pro-con list. But I think I would think about it for sure. I would consider my offer.
You would consider your offer. Good to know. You know what? Honestly, I could see you as a vampire.
Yeah, right? Well, I mean, I already don't sleep at nighttime, and I'm a regular human being, so that's already half the job, I'm pretty sure.
You would love the attire and the spooky castle you'd get to live in.
It's true. These are all
I think
things
you
that
could
speak to me.
even... Yeah, I think you could even get down with sleeping in a coffin. So, honestly, might be the best case scenario
If
for
I couldn't
you.
hear anything and nobody would bother me, I would 100% sleep in a coffin. That's like... That's a
Your
given.
ideal situation.
Yeah, I want people to be so afraid of waking me up. They're like, okay, but she's literally sleeping in a coffin. We will wait for her.
I mean, I think they already think that.
I think so. I do not
As
have the
someone
best
who
reputation
slept in the
when it
same
comes
room
to...
as you,
Yeah, I'm not
confirmed.
a morning person. It's rough going anytime when I first opened my eyes. But yeah, on that note, let's move to our next question. would you want to be forever young? Like, if you could put a pause on being 25 forever, would you do it?
That's hard because I feel like there's definitely benefits to staying young, you know? Like your body's still in good shape and you can kind of bounce back from things. But on the other hand, I've heard that 30 people enjoy more than their 20s. So maybe aging's for the best in some ways.
Okay, okay. See, I would definitely put a pause on being 26, but only because my back hurts like every day, and I've got knee problems. And after hurting my ankle like 8 months ago, it's not been the same since, and I can't imagine things getting better as I age. So I think for my own health and well-being, maybe putting a pause would be for the best.
See, I would be more willing to put a pause on my like physical body than on my like brain. You know, like
Oh yeah.
mentally I would want to continue aging.
Okay, okay. I could see that. Yeah, mentally I don't care. I can age as old as I want to be. But yeah, physically, like I said, for the back problems and everything, I would like to just not have it get worse. It's bad enough. I'm good.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Life does not need to be harder. All right. Let's spin for our last question. Okay, so if you had a noble title, what would you want?
Hmm.
Like a queen or a king or a duchess or a countess or a baroness or a lady or like any of these ones.
I mean,
A
I
laird.
feel like I would go for like a princess title or like a duchess or something like that because I feel like you get the perks without the responsibility of being queen.
Mm-hmm. Yep. The like a high society value without the pressure.
Exactly. You know, the money and riches without being the problematic one.
Mm-hmm. I can see it. I think for myself, I would be good with either countess or duchess or what was the other one I said? There was countess, duchess, or baroness because they all sound like really cool in their own ways. Like a countess always has that kind of like gothic vibe to it, whereas like a baroness is very like Sound of Music sounding. And
Yeah.
then what was the other one? I literally just said it. Baroness, Countess, Duchess. And then Duchess is very high society. Like I'm imagining like, you know, like very like chic 1800s. And so I'm like, I would love that. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Emily, the vampiric countess of Alberta.
Of course. I would be the one.
The one.
I am assuming we don't have those in Alberta. Would be my assumption. This feels very old, old European. But yeah, no.
That's why you could be the first and only.
Yeah, right. So that's what I would go for because, like I said, it's got a cool vibe to it. But yeah, that closes my round of questions for you. Can you guess what my story for you is today?
Some sort of royal vampire.
Okay.
That's all I got for you.
All right. I do really like the questions that I picked because it alludes directly the story so well, but if you don't know it, then you're like, what is happening? So I'm just gonna read you out the description, and then you can tell me if you remember you and me talking about it, because we mentioned this on an episode, I want to say like 2 or 3 months ago, and then I made a note of it afterwards. So either way, I'll go ahead. So Countess Elizabeth Báthory, was a
Yes.
Hungarian noblewoman and alleged serial killer from the family of Báthory, who owned land in the Kingdom of Hungary, which is now Hungary, Slovakia. Báthory and 4 of her servants were accused of torturing and killing hundreds of girls and women between 1590 and 1610. Her servants were put on trial and convicted, whereas Báthory was confined to her home and was eventually imprisoned in the castle of Just I forgot to look up the pronunciation for that. Csejte. Um, but yes, Elizabeth Bathory. So you do remember me talking about this with you?
Yes, you, I think, mentioned her during our Bloody Mary episode on Spooktober.
Yes. And she's a very interesting character. But it's one of those things where when a character or like a person becomes talked about so often, there's so many like different variations of stories that come up. So just for the sake of being accurate, I just wanted to give like the bare bones story of who she is. It's not super long, but this is kind of like the best way for you to learn exactly like what is historically true about her, versus kind of what came of her notoriety, if that kind of makes sense.
That makes sense.
Because it definitely is a little bit fictitious when you're looking at some of the stories that people talk about, like, oh, well, this person alive during this time said that she was able to turn into a bat, or like other random things. And I'm like, I don't think that's real, but I could be wrong.
Maybe. We'll never know.
Yeah. So on that note, I'll get right into this story here, and then you can tell me what you think afterwards.
All right, take her away, Em.
Okay. So, some say that the Countess Elizabeth Bathory, considered by many to be the world's worst female serial killer, was the true inspiration for Bram Stoker's Dracula. After all, legend has it that she bathed in the blood of at least 650 servant girls that she had tortured and killed. She was said to be so evil that the villagers kept their daughters in hiding for fear that Elizabeth would take them away. Her gruesome activities even earned her such names as the Infamous Lady and the Blood Countess. And this is her story. So, Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 to one of the most powerful Protestant families in Hungary at the time. She was the daughter of Baron George Bathory and Baroness Anna Bathory, who were both Bathorys by birth, related. And possibly
Yes.
stemming from inbreeding. Within her family, it is said that from an early age, Elizabeth suffered from seizures, loss of control, and fits of rage. As a child, she witnessed the brutal punishments handed out by her family's officers on their estates, and one anecdote describes a gypsy accused of theft who was sewn up in the belly of a dying horse and left then to die. Her family tree certainly included some disturbed kin as well. One of her uncles taught her Satanism, and she learned about sadomasochism from one of her aunties. So Elizabeth was married by the time she was 15 years old to Count Fenrik Nadassid, a soldier who would go on to lead the armies of Hungary against the Ottoman forces threatening Central Europe. After her marriage, the Countess became the mistress of the Nadasadi estate, where the couple earned a reputation as harsh masters. Building upon her own cruelty, it is believed that Fenrik showed her some of his own ways of punishing his servants, and after 10 years, Elizabeth gave birth to 3 daughters and a son. Although the Count participated in his wife's torture activities, it wasn't until the death of her husband in the early 1600s that Elizabeth's true evil came to fruition. She eventually moved to one of her castles in Kastis, in northwest Hungary, which is now Slovakia, and began surrounding herself with a cohort of servants to help her with her torturing practices. Legend has it that one day an attendant girl was brushing Elizabeth's hair when she accidentally pulled too hard and it tugged a snag in her hair. The Countess erupted in anger, jumping up and striking the girl with the back of her hand. The strike was so hard that it made the girl bleed, and some of the blood was left on Elizabeth's hand. Later that night, Elizabeth noticed that the skin on her hand where the blood had been looked more youthful than she had seen in years. This gave her the idea that if such a small amount of blood could make her hand look so young, then more could restore youthfulness to her whole body. It is said that this is when the madness began, and Elizabeth started then to bathe in the blood of virgin girls. So young women began to disappear from villages near and far, as well as children. Unhappy girls were lured to the castle with the prospect that they would be able to find work there, but were never seen again. When they arrived, they were locked up in a cellar as they awaited torture. Elizabeth carried out much of the torture herself, often beating the girls to death, and sometimes she would sew a girl's mouth shut, forcing her to eat her own flesh or burn her genitals. When she was too sick to get out of bed to beat them, Elizabeth would order her servants to bring a girl up to her quarters, where she would then bite their face and shoulders. In other instances, she would stick needles underneath the girl's fingertips before cutting off the fingers of those who would then try to take them out. Soon Elizabeth began to run out of young women because she had either already taken them, or the villagers had started to hide their daughters out of fear that she would take them. This is when the Countess began to resort to noble girls, a decision that would ultimately lead to her demise. So, as you can see already, this is a bad start. It was a bad start at the actual start, and then this, like, her actual case of murdering people is also a really bad start.
Yeah, I don't love her logic. Yes, youthful blood make me youthful. It's kind of like the mom from Rapunzel in Tangled.
I know.
That's what it reminds me of.
It's really funny you say that. I actually thought about that too when I first started researching like what I wanted to present as my story. Because I was like, this does have a Mother Gothel vibe to it, but not entirely, because obviously, I mean, Mother Gothel wasn't a serial killer. But yeah, just the obsession, though, with, like, youth and beauty and, like, some of these other things, it's like, oh, okay, interesting. And then also, like, the very sadistic part of it with all the torture and things, because you would think that once you have the blood, that should be enough, but there just had to be that extra layer involved, which is, not great.
I mean,
sounds like a mental
I think
problem.
anyone willing to take young girls for their blood has probably got some other problems going on. So I feel like it might check out, unfortunately.
Yeah, and then that's the thing too, is that when we do talk about like older historical figures, because usually this happens a lot with royalty, where a lot of incest starts to play in because they want to keep the royal blood within the family or whatever the idea was back then. You don't really know exactly how that alters people's chemistry either. Like, obviously there's physical deformities, like with, I think it Prince Charles, like one of the older ones who he had Habsburger syndrome or something.
I'm not sure, actually.
Yeah, it's a condition caused from inbreeding and all that type of thing, and incest or whatever. And then, yeah, as for the mental factor, there's got to be something. I don't know what it is exactly, but clearly this lady's got problems. So that could also be a factor.
Yes, I would agree with you that incest probably does not have great effects on your mental or physical health. So.
Yeah. So definitely date outside your families, everybody, for the best of everyone. But
Don't be a cousin fucker.
Don't be a cousin fucker. It's not a good look. Nobody likes that. And it is bad for the future. So take that as well. But yes, continuing. After the murder of one noble girl in 1609, which Elizabeth had tried to stage as a suicide, the authorities had finally decided to act. So during a night raid, officials searched the castle and discovered the dead bodies of young girls everywhere that they looked. Some were missing arms and eyes. One body was in the fireplace, not yet fully burned. Elizabeth was then taken to trial, and many testified against her, including her servants as well as survivors. One of the servants said that the girls were tied up and beaten to death until their whole body was black as charcoal and their skin was battered and torn. One girl suffered from 200 blows before dying. Another servant admitted that she had taken red-hot fire pokers and shoved them into the mouth of one girl, and then she said she placed her fingers in the mouth of another and split the sides open.
That's horrible.
Yeah, like, the torture is unbelievable. So these are ones that are, like, more surrounding this court date that had happened, but, like I was saying earlier, there's a lot of ones where, I don't know if it's just necessarily born out of notoriety, some of these things, but there were a lot more accounts of types of, like, tortures and stuff, but with what I found, I was like, I don't really think we need to go more in depth for, like, how horribly these people were treated. But yeah, so that's that. And finally, after hearing countless testimonies of the appalling activities that went on behind the castle's walls, Elizabeth and her servants were convicted on 80 counts of murder, although evidence showed that as many as 650 females may have been killed in total. Her servants were sentenced to death, but Elizabeth was imprisoned for life in a room in her own castle that was boarded up with tiny slits for food and air. Elizabeth lived for 3.5 years before she was found dead, lying face down on the floor. After her death, Countess Elizabeth Báthory went down in history as one of the most evil women to have ever walked the earth. Which, yeah, she's very, usually when you search up her story, she comes up at around the same, notoriety in Europe as, say, Jack the Ripper and, some of these other ones. But yeah, no, hers is hers they coined as being a story bathed in blood, because no matter how many things you search up or how many things you look into, it's just all bad. And like I said too, it's really hard to pick kind of what people came up with and what was born out of notoriety versus what they actually found. But this is the closest I could get to kind of giving you an idea of who she was and what her story was.
I'm getting the vibe she was a bad person and we don't like her.
Yes, and like I said, my story is super short today, but that is in general the story of Elizabeth Báthory, a crazy lady.
She sounds like it. I don't think that if I gotta pick one historical figure to have coffee with, I don't think she'd be on my list.
No, and that I cannot even begin to think from the mind of somebody who would do and act that way, but obviously that's probably a good thing. But yeah, no, lots and lots of women and children killed though. Lots.
Awesome. Not really, but yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything you'd like to add for thoughts about my story?
I mean, I can definitely see why people might think that the Bloody Mary tale came from her now, because
yes,
that was kind of her thing, being bloody, loving the blood.
Yeah, that's the thing too, is that there was also a big part about Bloody Mary that I could have added into this story, but since I just talked about her, I was probably not. but yeah, just a very notorious figure in history, and that's all I got. I was thinking too, so my reason for picking a shorter story today is because we're about to move into our Christmas season as well. So this is a nice little bite-sized episode for our listeners who do like the shorter stories, because we have heard about that. And then, yeah, just getting wound up for Christmas, and I hope everybody's really excited to hear our stories coming up, because we're going to be sharing some really interesting topics with you guys.
Yes, so we will be doing kind of what we did for Spooktober, where we're going to spin the wheel and see what our topic is for next week. So speaking of that, do you want to see what we're going to talk about next weekend?
I sure can. Let's get into it. Christmas Wheel of Crime. All right, so our story for next week is country crimes.
Oh, like a little rural holiday celebration.
Yeah, people are going home for the holidays. Many people have parents that either live out in the country or are retired. And yeah, or originally come from small towns. And I feel like a rural Christmas could be a really fun thing to talk about. Just with even the people I know who live out in the country, some strange people, to say the least. Weird things happen in rural places, as we all know. And yeah, I'm really excited to see what we come up with for next week.
Me too. But that brings us to the end of our episode. So do you want to take her away with our end credits, Em?
I sure can. So if you like today's episode, you can leave us a review on wherever you listen to your podcast, our podcast in your ears. 5 stars and a nice little thing helps us with statistics and all, so we can reach out to more people, so that'd be greatly appreciated. Besides that, you can also look at us on our website, which is www.wheelofcrime.com, if you want to check us out there. We also have an email, so if you want to email in anything you want to say, that is wheelofcrime@gmail.com. We also have a Patreon, which is wheelofcrime@Patreon, if you want to donate to the show. We also have our Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, if you want to check us out there, all at Wheel Feel of Crime. And lastly, we are doing our listener episode again, so if anybody wants to send in a story of their own that is like Christmassy themed, whether it be spooky, crime related, we do have our Google Doc up still, and we would love to hear from you guys. We had a lot of fun with our last one, and it's just really nice to be able to hear the kind of experiences that people have, because it's a real big, silly world that we live in.
Sure is. And if you want to find that, the Google Doc is linked in the bio of our Instagram and our TikTok. You can submit your stories completely anonymously there. So we are looking forward to hearing from you.
Yes, and with that, we will see you very soon for the Christmas season next week. Oh,
Yes.
deck dolls!
I can't believe it's here, but we will see you next week with another new episode. Okay, bye!
Bye!